Hello and welcome back to Survey of Bio. We are starting our 6th unit here. Remember we just finished up about energy and enzymes, and so now we're going to look at how that energy is actually stored in biological systems and converted, in this case from solar energy. So to begin that, our study of photosynthesis, if you will, we're going to look at the electromagnetic spectrum and how light energy is ultimately converted into the sugars by plants that can be used by animals. So what is light? Light is the electromagnetic radiation, or EMR. So white light, if we use a prism, splits into all the colors of the rainbow. So Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And if you look at the diagram on the bottom, we can see here's the visible spectrum, which is actually just a very, very tiny portion of the entire electromagnetic spectrum. But this is the part that we can see. And one thing that I want you to look at the ends. Way over on the right here, we've got the ultraviolet. And when you go outside in the sun, you've got to wear sunglasses or put on sunblock to protect yourself because it's high energy. And over here on the left, we have infrared, which is like the energy given off by a fire, which can burn you, but it's not going to cause things like cancer. It's relatively low energy. So one thing that I want you to remember about the visible spectra is that red light is relatively low energy and blue light is relatively high energy, and then everything in between. So the electromagnetic spectrum that we actually look and see is shown here, and it's everything from radio waves down here on the left with a low frequency, all the way up to gamma rays, which have a very high frequency or high energy. And you can see the visible spectra is here in the middle, and it's a relatively low percentage of this. But as we go from low frequency to high, we can see we go from radio to microwaves, infrared, the visible. Then we get into the ultraviolet, X-rays, which are harmful, and gamma rays, which are harmful as well. And you can see the relative size in the middle here, where they show right here the wavelengths of that. And we can see radio are relatively long wavelengths, but they're low energy. By the time we get up to gamma rays, they're short wavelengths with high frequencies. But this is the entire electromagnetic spectra that we can see here. And again, if we break it out, we can see here in the middle, visible light is only a very small part of it, and we usually show it as an expanded version of that. But all electromagnetic radiations travels at the speed of light. And visible light is the smallest percentage. So again, this one's flipped. So we have radio waves over here on the right, microwaves, infrared, visible, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, all the way up to cosmic rays on the left. But you can see that it is a continuum from high energy to low energy, with what we can see actually being a very small part of it. So visible light waves are the only electromagnetic waves that we can see. We see these waves as the colors of the rainbow. Each color has a different wavelength. Red has the longest wavelength and lowest energy, and violet has the shortest wavelength and the highest energy. When seen together, they make white light. And most of the time when we see light, we don't see the individual colors. It's only when it's split through a prism or raindrops in the case of a rainbow that we see them broken into their different colors. So just to wrap up again here, here's the visible spectra again. So we have the blue to red, ultraviolet being just outside the blue and being very high energy, red being just outside or visible at the red and being lower energy, and everything in between. And usually the wavelengths will be measured in something called nanometers. So you can see red is about 750 nanometers, and ultraviolet just above that, the violet, about 400. Now, what is light? Light is actually little particles of energy that are given off called photons. So a photon is a particle of light energy, and each color has a different amount of energy, a different size, if you will. So what happens is in an atom is we have electrons circling the nucleus, and we can see the blue dots right here and here. And as particles bombard it, those electrons will get hit, and they'll absorb energy, and they'll go up to a higher energy level, shown by the number 2 right over here. Now the electrons would like to go back down. They want to become stable again. They want to fall back down to their original energy level. And when they do that, when they drop, in this case from out here down to the inner level as shown by number 3, the energy that they had absorbed is now given off as a photon of light. That's what we see. If it happens to be in the right wavelength, we'll see that as a flash of light. And again, the lower energy flashes will be what color? Red. And the higher energy flashes will be blue. So a photon's a little particle of light energy. Not to be confused with the photon torpedoes of Star Trek, although Star Trek is a great show to kind of see. Back in the 60s and 70s, they were really forward-looking, and a lot of science came from science fiction. So the color of an object is the same as what is reflected. So when we look at someone's shirt and we see a blue shirt and someone else has a red shirt, what does that mean in terms of color? What are we actually seeing? What we're seeing is that when sunlight, which is white light, strikes an object, some colors are absorbed and some are reflected. The ones that are reflected to our eyes, that's the color that we see. So if someone is wearing a red shirt, it's absorbing all wavelengths except for red. If someone's wearing a blue shirt, they're absorbing all the wavelengths except for blue, which gets reflected. So plants, which predominantly appear to us green, they appear green because they're reflecting green wavelengths, just as this picture shows with the green being reflected to this person's eyes. So what we perceive as color are the wavelengths that are reflected by an object. And different objects can be dyed different colors in the case of clothes with different pigments. And in the case of plants, different pigments, you probably know of chlorophyll, will reflect different wavelengths and absorb others. So that changes how we perceive their color. So materials will heat up with more absorbed light. And we know this that if when you go out and you wear a black t-shirt during the summer, it heats up a lot more than if you wear a white t-shirt, because black is absorbing all of the colors and reflecting none, whereas white is reflecting all of them. Now if we look at the diagram here, we have some substance that is on the bottom here, and the light coming in has all the different wavelengths, and the red and the green will be absorbed by the material, and the blue is what's reflected. That's what we perceive that color to be. So when we look at that object, we see it as blue because it's bouncing off, it's reflecting blue wavelengths. Now, how does this apply to photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis reflects green, because that's what we see, and it absorbs mostly the red and the blue. So if you look at the arrows coming in, the red and the blue are going to be absorbed by this layer called the mesophyll. That's where the chloroplasts are, and the green gets reflected, and that's what we see. There's also something here reflected, IR, infrared, and we're not going to talk about that right now because we really want to kind of key in on the visible spectrum. So here we go. We look at this. So here are the wavelengths that get absorbed by plants. And if you look, we absorb really high in the blue and the red. Where don't plants absorb high? They don't absorb really very much in the green. That's what's being reflected. That's why we see it as green. It's also important because look at the highest spike. Look right around here, about 450 to 500 nanometers. Chlorophyll A and B. This is where we have the highest rates of photosynthesis. And therefore, the highest rates of ATP production. And that's what it's going to be all about. We want to make this molecule called ATP so we can have lots of energy for that. And that happens mostly about 450 to 500 nanometers. So there we go. Then we're going to wrap up our first unit of the photosynthesis with the electromagnetic spectrum. And I'll leave you with a Foxtrot cartoon. And some of you that know Jason He's very scientific, and so he says, do you sell ultraviolet bull? Excuse me? What about regular bull? No. Blue bull? No. Green bull? No. Yellow bull? No. Orange bull? No. Rats? Okay, I'll take a red bull. Well, I was hoping for something a little higher energy. At least it is an infrared bull. So if you learned anything from our last little bit, hopefully that cartoon will make a little bit of sense to you. So again, thank you for your time, and we will see you next time.